Good
Good
morning,
morning,
Hayley.
Brian. Morning, Jean.
Good,
Good
good
morning.
morning, Jean.
Morning,
Yep.
Brian.
Jean McGlynn is a long time dear friend of Ray's and mine. We have a brother-sister relationship,
Yeah.
and she's a very wise woman, Hayley. And I think you're going to have fun talking with Jean. Jean, you know all about Hayley. I talk
Yes.
about her all the time, and I don't know whether or not you've seen a podcast, but
Mhm.
recently, Hayley, Jean lost two significant people in her life, a husband and son. And I asked her if she had any interest in talking about the process of grief. And she said, yes, she did. So that's what I'm suggesting our topic be. And Hayley, I'm going to now pass it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jean, for joining us. And I'm so sorry that you're experiencing this now.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It's great to be with you.
I think grief is such a great topic because I think even coming out of COVID, I feel like there's just this overwhelming sense of grief with people. And I think there's different levels of grief. So obviously for you, Jean,
Mhm.
there are these sort of stages of grief that we all read about. And we kind of measure success based on where we think we are in that sort of scale of grief. In your experience, does that apply for you?
I think so. The passing of my husband is about a month ago, and my son is about 5 months ago. So it's very fresh for me, the
Mhm.
whole process. But I'm finding that for me, grief comes in waves, and I do see a somewhat of a diminishment of the grief coming every day, several times a day, when it overwhelms you, and that's being reduced little by little. I think probably with the help of a lot of prayer and my friends and a great support system. But I do believe, and I'm pretty sure this grief remains with you forever, but it's in a different modicum, a different way than it is right now. So it's just going through the process of grieving and allowing yourself to grieve and allowing yourself to cry and to, beat on the pillows or whatever you're going to do to get rid of the frustration. But so that's where I am right now, and that's how I feel about it.
You mentioned two words there, obviously grief and frustration. How do you tell the difference between the two when it's so new for you?
Well, grief is all about missing the people who have gone and not having them around you anymore. And frustration is a little bit different. It's the fact that you can't control that. And for me, that's a big lesson. You have no opportunity, nor did you ever have any opportunity to change the outcome of what was going to be, which is frustrating for somebody who's an A-type personality. We understand that, right?
Oh, I never guessed that about you, Jean. But
So
I do want you to know we rearranged our cabinet as you instructed before you left.
good. Send me pictures.
I did. I actually have.
Did
Uh,
you?
Jean is a very fine interior designer, Hayley, and so she has a good eye, and the good eye, I think, appears more than just in balancing a room, but in also taking in life as it presents itself. Seeing the big picture. I think the three of us, I feel gifted by that. Ray is more, left and solving problems, 1, 2, 3. But I was reading about, I love, Hayley, you talking about COVID and its effect. We all grieve in different ways the loss of something that we cared about, right? Um, we could grieve. My best friend died years ago, and no one has ever filled that hole. and that's not an insult to my best, my other best friends. It's just that it's a hole that can't be filled, no matter what, no matter how many years pass. The relationship is not going to be the same with someone else. Jean knew, that Jack was going to die, and knew that Matt was going to die. And I think your grieving probably started before, right, Jean?
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Especially for Matt, he is 52 years old. And that was a long process. I mean, he had brain cancer for 18 years. So it was a long process.
Yeah.
Knowing full well the end was probably going to be. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of segues into my next question for you. How did your life prepare you for these losses? On their own, they're huge losses, but so close together, tremendous.
That's an interesting question. I think a lot of my ability to deal with it has been great support from family and friends. Here I go.
That's okay.
We're
I
here.
love yours.
So
It's a gift. A gift.
anyway, I also think a lot of work on my spirituality and a lot of work on my understanding that I had to let go. And that was a big lesson
Mm.
in all of it.
Huge.
Huge.
Yeah. And all three of us in our practice, say the words. We know what the words are about letting go. The Buddha's teaching about there is suffering, and but you don't have to embrace it. You have to accept it and let it go. But those words and those beliefs, you wonder where they went when you're actually going through it.
True.
That's very true. But I think that is what I see that as my lesson in all of this, because of my personality and because of my always thinking that I can take on something and there's a problem and I can solve the problem.
Mm.
And there was no solving either of these two problems. So it was a huge lesson for me. And I think, as I said, family and friends have been an amazing support to me. And it's people that I haven't heard from in years have reached out to me without, it's just been amazing. And I think when you know that you have that kind of support from people, it does help you. I kind of call it my angel wings carrying me up, supporting me.
That very much resonates for me, because I've been noticing how my relationships change and how much more accepting I am of letting go, but also accepting help and accepting the support, and really being grateful for those souls that are my sort of foundation of support, no matter what time of the day it is, no matter if we've spoken for a year or 4 months. I have these souls that hold me. They're human souls.
Yes.
That hold me. And I think when we're on this spiritual journey, we get so caught up in the intangible and trust your guides and trust in spirit and trust in these things. But actual human support is so, so important. So for you as a type A, I'm also a type A, accepting
No.
and actually saying the words, I need help, I need support. Was that something you learned earlier on, or was that something that also sort of came rushing through with the letting go? Do you think they go hand in hand?
For me, it did. Yeah. I mean, that was, as I said, especially with Matt's challenges. It was all about, every few months when he would get his MRIs, it's just trusting and praying that all would be well, but knowing that it might not be, but knowing also, learning, I should say, as time progressed, that there was nothing I could do except pray about it, for support for him and his family, and support for myself and my husband and his brothers through all of this. So I think that's where I am about that. Right.
Do you think there's a difference, either one of you, in the grief that comes from a surprise death than one that one is prepared for?
I don't know how to answer that, because the two deaths that I've experienced, all the deaths actually that I've experienced, have been, you knew it was coming. It was, you know, it was no surprise. But I would imagine, I think for me, if I think about it, a surprise death would be far worse than being able to, in some modicum of way, prepare for it, however that may be for you.
I find that when I was grieving, the frustration was I didn't have anyone to talk to that I thought understood.
Oh.
You know, even with, you know, Ray, but Ray was away a lot, and he knew how much I love Mary Lee, but I didn't know who to talk to about it. I didn't know that if anyone knew how much pain I was in, if they could relate to it. And I don't remember lots of people reaching out.
I think death is such an awkward thing. And I think, to answer your question, Brian, I think the surprise is different. Like, the news of the death feels different, but I think the grief is the same.
Mm-hmm.
The feeling of that loss is the same. And when I say the same, I would, you know, that acknowledges that for every single person, grief has a different feeling. Grief is a different process, although it can look almost the same on the outside. But I think, you know, the level of grief that a person feels after a loss, it doesn't really matter how that loss and the timing of that loss, it's the loss is the loss.
And people leave the loss of a pet. And, you know, it's important to honor that grief and not say, oh, please, it's a dog. You know, I lost my husband. That person's grief around that dog is intense and lasts for a long, long time. Ray didn't want to get another dog for 13 years because he was so upset when Britt was put down.
I think that raises, you know, the question of soulmates and how we accept soulmates. You know, animals can be soulmates. And I think when you have that attachment or you feel that connection with a similar energy, and then that connection is severed, that loss is heartbreaking.
And Brian, I'm so sorry that you didn't have anybody to talk to, because that for me has been, and it's been interesting, the people who have supported me. And as I said, some of them haven't been in my life for a while, are people who experienced the loss of a child or a husband. So they have come forth and they understand. You know, you tease about, you know, not wanting to be part of that club, but those people have been so instrumental in helping me understand the process and dealing with the grief. And you know, it's different, as you say, Hayley, it's so personal, it's so different for everybody. The way we deal with it has a lot to do with our personalities and our, I don't know, our surroundings, our friends, our life. And so I think I've been really blessed to have that, because I don't know how I would have done it if I didn't have someone to talk to about it. I mean, you and Ray have been rocks for me. You know that. And it's the good listener, right? But because you have not experienced it, but you listen and you empathize. But the people who have experienced it have an even deeper understanding than those who care about you as a friend and want to support you as a friend.
Mm-hmm.
I read a quote yesterday. I think it might, I don't know if it was Rumi. It was one of the sort of more on the Sufi side. And they were saying that the reason why we go through these things is to understand the compassion so that we can teach or hold other people's hands when they go through it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of, you know, in that letting go, asking why and trying to figure out and understand the why. And especially if you're a type A person, you're always trying to solve, and the why gets very important.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lovely answer to the why, is that we go through these things because we are members of a bigger collective and we're all teaching each other.
True.
Certainly doesn't make it easier.
And that's, Hayley and Jean, why the word elder has become so important to me. And I don't think it's age related. I think an elder is somebody who has gone through an experience and can mentor people who are going through the same experience at a later time. I mean, that's sharing wisdom. And, Matt was in his 50s, but that didn't mean he wasn't an elder, right?
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I learned a great deal from him.
Yeah.
I was sitting with this topic yesterday with grief, and sort of in my own way asking why, because I love to know. I love just asking why and then seeing what comes with that, and sort of a deeper level of understanding that I can then let go. And I was asking why, and sort of, why is it so painful? And what I got from that was because we give so much of ourselves to another person that when they go, they take that with them. So it's, there's almost like a double grieving here. There's a grieving of a loss of that person, but a loss of what they took with them. A part of you that they took with them. And sort of the healing process is being able to reclaim what we perceive that they took with them and bringing it back to ourselves. I was wondering, Jean, does that resonate with you at all, or how?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And it's lovely to hear it expressed in words, because I think that's really true. Of relationship is gone as well as the person. And so how do you can't bring the person back, but can the memories of the relationship be retained and support you and be defining for you and as you go on through life? I think that's beautiful, the way you express that.
And I think, when we talk about the void,
yeah,
does that, being able to start pulling back pieces of you from these grief-stricken moments, does that allow us, and is that part of our human journey, to start closing the void and filling the void up with ourselves?
Good question. And perhaps I had a reading. I have a lovely book called Healing After Loss, and the reading on the 1st of January was about filling that void. Not that you're placing the person, you aren't, but filling the void, kind of honoring the person that you lost. I thought that was a really interesting thought. And who knows? I mean, is it possible to do that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure you can, but it's a good thought.
It's a good thought.
About 25%, I read, of people who have suffered a loss have an experience of being with that person after the death. They can describe exactly the conversation, where the person was sitting. So, I mean, I don't say that with, I don't know what that means. I just know that I find that when I process grief, acknowledging the person periodically throughout your life with a candle and a cone of incense helps, because it says you're not gone. I haven't forgotten you. You're still part of me. And another element of grief is some people don't know what to do with all the things that their spouse did, like the checking account and, calling the contractors. The spouse that survives often has no relationship with the contractors or with the bank. And I think that deepens what we consider grief, because there's a whole sense of loss that no one's paying attention to.
True. That's true. Very true.
I think life
And I
changes.
was fortunate. Go ahead.
As you know, carry on, Jean.
I've been fortunate in the fact that I have a son who supports me in financial matters and began supporting both Jack and I in financial matters before Jack became so ill that he couldn't handle them anymore. And so that has been a huge bonus because I know friends, women friends, who have lost their husbands, who don't know if they don't even have, they can't even get into the computer because they don't have a password. And they have no idea of what to do. And I think that's got to increase your anxiety, of course, which I'm sure contributes to your grief being even worse than it would be. I don't know. I'm speculating.
I volunteered as a buddy to a person who was older than me, who had lost his spouse suddenly. And part of his grief was the loss, but also I had to teach him how to use a cell phone and how to use a computer. And once he learned those things, he felt stronger, you know, in terms of dealing with his loss. He wasn't so frightened by it.
That's interesting.
Hayley, have you had a loss in your life that knocked you out?
I've had several losses, some of them human, some of them my own losses. You know, and I've experienced the loss of one of my best friends who died of ovarian cancer. So I experienced sort of that, what we're talking about, you feel like you can prepare for it. And I've also experienced the death of my cousin who died in a car accident, and that was very sudden. And, you know, in my own losses, I've experienced grief in just life, you know? And I think, you know, whenever these things happen, I always find myself asking why. I need more information. For me to process this, I need more information. I need to understand more. And that's where I get sort of, I sit and I kind of just allow myself to be in the anger, the frustration. And, you know, a lot of the time, the message is always give yourself permission to feel this. Give yourself permission to be angry, to cry, to rage, to swear at the universe, because that helps us become better people. It gives us the space, if we want, to choose to be better people and to live a life more authentically aligned with our soul. But, you know, it never gets rid of the pain. And I think that's what we pray for a lot of the time, is for the pain to be dull.
There's grief also associated with losing a job or having a friendship, and you know, one doesn't have,
yeah. And it's, you know, one of the things that I tussle with is death of a person harder than a death of a relationship where the person's still walking around. And I think, you know, the answer for me always comes back to grief is grief. How you deal with grief and how you feel a loss, it's irrelevant whether that person is walking or going. And I wanted to address something that you mentioned earlier, Brian, too, was sort of, you know, when a person passes over, the person that stays behind often feels them around them. And I read energy, and I've helped a few people through the death process. And I've always seen the beauty of death and how the relationship changes. Our definition of loss is loss of the physical. And I think if we're open to accepting that the relationship can change and now you have a completely different dynamic of the relationship, you still have that connection. It's just in a different way. And I think, you know, for some, the way that I've seen it, it's a far more authentic way. It's straight to the heart. There's no little things that annoy you. It's just pure, pure love. So I've always seen the people of those souls are still around and available to us.
And I encourage people, whether or not they see the individual, to sit and talk with them.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Jack, I really miss you, because I think it makes them more present. Jean, can you relate to that? Have you
Oh,
done?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And, I mean, I'm talking to Matt and Jack every day,
Mhm.
every day when I get up in the morning and sometimes during the day, especially if I'm in a tight spot or I've got a challenge in front of me. I'll say, okay, you two, I've been told I got one on each side of me. Get going, solve this problem for me, help me to
Mhm.
see what I need to do. And I really do believe that happens, that things become a little clear to you sometimes, or a solution to something, or an attitude that you have. You think to yourself, oh, I really need to change. I need to change that. I need to do something different about that. And I
Mhm.
think it's the inspiration from them. I totally believe that. Totally. And I had an experience, Hayley, and Brian, I'm sure remembers, I've been seeing uh, a spiritual advisor, a chakra worker for probably 30 years. And she has seen Matt, worked with Jack, worked with all our family for many years. And Jack or Matt was very tuned into her, uh, more than Jack was. Uh, can you believe that, Brian?
Yeah, Jack was a wonderful man in another world.
Yeah. So anyway, I saw her just a few days after Matt passed away. And how are you doing? She said, and I said, I don't know if I can do this. She said, what do you mean you don't know if you can do this? And I burst into tears. I said, I don't know what to do. She said, just be and accept this. And I said, and I'm angry with Matt. She said, why? I said, because everyone else has had a sign from him that he's fine, but not me. And so it was the end of the session. And she said, put your hands on your shoulders. I was lying down. Close your eyes. Just relax. And immediately this image of Matt, who is always smiling, comes up.
Mm.
And I start laughing. And she said, you see him, don't you? And I said, yes, I do. And he's saying to you, Jane, which he would call me when he was annoyed with me. Jane, not mom. Trust me. I'm fine. And you are too. Powerful.
Really powerful.
I think, it's certainly not acceptable to say, but for me, that's what I love about death. It opens us up into the experience of another soul in such a profound way. And like I said, it's a whole new relationship now. And when we talk about the support, of course, we've spoken about how important that human physical support is, but we also need to push ourselves to be open to the support in different ways because it's there.
It's there.
And it's often the very clear, like, just trust, just open your eyes and take a step. You're fine.
Exactly.
Part of grief too, for at least my experience right now, is the loss of youth, and the awareness that you're less able to even stand as firmly, to pull as hard, and it hits you, slaps you in the face, and says, "Are you getting this?" And you can say, "Yeah, it's fine," but I think some of us grieve in measures, big or small, the awareness that we're heading into the end of Act 3.
True. It's true. For example, Hayley, I'll share with you the other day, I was getting out of the car with Brian, and he said, here, let me help you. He said, I don't know exactly how the conversation went, but it alluded to the fact that he perceived me as a little feeble. Well, I was really.
No, not feeble.
Oh, yes. That was the word you used, because it pushed a button. And I thought,
Yeah.
feeble. Damn it. I don't want to be perceived as feeble. I'm not feeble. But then he clarified what he meant when we chatted about it. But you change, your body changes, uh, your ability to move changes, as you said, Brian, and it's a fact of life, and you have to kind of come to terms with it. And it's, you do the best you can to stay healthy and not to be unbalanced and not to have, need help out of the car. But it's the way it is. It really is. You have to accept it.
Jean, are you sure the word wasn't frail? That you
Oh,
look
yes,
frail?
it was. It was frail. I'm sorry. It
Yeah.
was frail.
Feeble sounds like you can't do whatever.
That's
But I
next.
think you
That's
probably
probably-
took it as the energy of feeble.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
that's probably why I
You were
kept you
right.
up on. You had the wrong word.
I did. Thanks for the correction. Yeah.
I try in my life to redefine everything the way that my heart wants me to define it. And age has been a big, not just because sort of you, Brian, and I talk about age often, but it is sort of a topic that really triggers me. Because, as we're talking about, maturity of a soul has nothing to do with age. It has everything to do with the experiences and how vast, how deep those experiences are. And, allowing myself to start forgetting about age and moving more into my body. How does this feel? And I just turned 44, and I'm, realizing that there's some things, I'm not a spry 20-year-old anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like a hard workout at the gym takes a good 24 hours to recover from.
Yep.
And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, is this age, or is this me just becoming more and more and more aware of my body? Sort of tightly coming into my body and being able to feel at a level of maturity I've never had before.
But Hayley, perhaps that's because of your age. Perhaps we become aware of things that have always been there as we age. That the golden ticket of aging is awareness. Awareness of
time, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's the difference between time and age?
Yep.
It's having the time to experience life and to be able to realize that you can bundle down a mountain and recover from that really easily when you're 20, but when you're 40, it takes like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
That comes with time. And I hope that we move as a society more to redefining things in a more energetic way. So instead of age and putting us into these buckets, it's how is time? How have you experienced time?
Jean, how do you experience thoughts about the future now? I mean, you still have grieving to go through, but I know you're feeling stronger. When you think about the future, are they hopeful thoughts, or are they filled with dread? So many people close down after the death of a spouse. What about you?
Well, as I mentioned to you and Ray the other day, I feel like I'm approaching, maybe on the cusp of something new, and I'm approaching a door that I'm going to open. And there's a future in my life that is going to be exciting and different than it's been. And I'm hoping that I can recognize that. And I know that I can accept it because I'm looking forward to that. And I'm just basically trying to do some things in my life that are different. For example, Hayley, you don't know, but I have 12 grandchildren. And grandchildren have been a very important part of my life. And I've spent a lot of time growing my relationship with each of my grandchildren. But I have just kind of in the past, I don't know, since Jack died and since Matt died, realized that that's just this one little part over here. And I don't have to be responsible for those children. I can just enjoy them, but it's just one segment of my life. So I'm right now looking for example, some art classes and I think I found one that sounds really interesting to me that I want to do, and that I'm going to, sign up for. And then I'm also want to work on my health, being stronger, going to the gym, taking a few classes. I walk every day, at least like 2 miles, and continuing to do that. And keeping myself as active as possible, physically as well as mentally. And doing some design work. I miss it terribly. I miss the creative process. I miss the people that I meet, the clients that I meet. And so I'm excited about some of those things. And I'm thinking that that's what's going to keep me going. That excitement about life and not knowing what's ahead of me, but being prepared and willing and excited about embracing that, whatever it is. That's where I am.
And I'm hopeful, confident that we have a lot more time ahead of us, Jean, to be brother and sister and make each other laugh and
And beat
share
up on
recipes.
share recipes. We will.
I had a thought while you were speaking there, Jean, sort of the opening, the sweetness that comes out of this destruction. Do either of you think it's possible to reach that kind of sweetness, that sort of noticing that the door's open and noticing that life can still be beautiful? Do you think that's possible without the devastating losses, in whichever form they come?
Are you asking, is it possible to see a future without loss?
Is it possible to embrace that sweetness, that excitement, that sort of knowing that you're okay with uncertainty a little bit more now? Is it possible to reach that place without a devastating loss?
What do you think? Well, part of it too, Jean has a freedom now, with Jack's death. Jack was, failing for a long while. There's a freedom that comes from being single, right? But it's an interesting question, Hayley. I mean, my mom lost 3 children, and died of lymphoma, and the doctor said that she kept swallowing her grief. She never expressed it. And so there weren't any open doors for her. She was stayed in this cycle. But another person could go through the same experience and not. And your question really is, well, what if somebody who didn't go through any of those experiences? Is that right?
Yeah.
Am I right?
They experience that sweetness, because we can all say here we've been through loss on different, stages. And we can say, we can see the sweetness that comes afterwards. We can open up into that beauty. Is it possible without that loss?
Well, Brian mentioned, and you mentioned too, Haley, there's all kinds of losses, not just the death of a spouse or a child, which is perhaps the worst loss of all, but perhaps we all experience losses in our lives of different kinds, and maybe that does help us. I don't know if it helps us to experience that sweetness. I'm not sure. It's a really good question. I have to think about that a little more.
Well, what I hear Hayley asking you, Jean, is if you have friends who have experienced no loss in their life, no death of a child or a spouse, no significant loss that stopped them in their tracks, do you think they experience the same sweetness that you do? Does it take a loss to open a door? Am I right, Hayley?
Yeah, and I think Jean sort of hit on that in a previous response. But, I think it does come from looking at other people and kind of sitting there going like, why is your life so easy?
Right. And it might not be.
It may not be, context is everything. But, there's comparison and this whole idea of justice and fairness. Sometimes I sit back and I'm like, are they experiencing, is it possible to experience that sweetness without such destruction and devastation?
Well, here's my question to you. Does the ability to have to see that sweetness and to know that it's there for you, even if you haven't experienced a situation that's caused you a lot of grief, could that be influenced by where you are in your spiritual journey?
I was just thinking the same thing too, when we come back to the maturity, the soul maturity.
I wonder.
Oh, we all know that, believe in old souls, as children have an awareness. I think we're old souls. I think being an old soul helps one see the sweetness. I guess that's it.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah. And it's interesting to me that one doesn't really realize that you're an old soul until something significant happens in your life, maybe. I don't know how to explain this, how to realize this. I mean,
I think the acceptance, because I grew up knowing I was an old soul. And it was something one of the first things I remember hearing as a child was I was an old soul. And I think it took a big event for me to accept it. And that's just my experience. I don't know. How about for you, Brian?
Hayley, part of it is just getting constant affirmations that you don't invite. You're not looking for them, of people talking about what you did for them. What you said was so helpful, or what you wrote was so helpful, and you start, scratching your head and saying, well, I don't consider myself anything but a writer who thinks, a spiritual pilgrim. I do think that becoming aware that there's something unique, or that you're an old soul, sometimes requires a friend holding up a mirror, and saying, I want you to take a look at this, because we're at the same vibration, and people get the vibration thing. We're vibrating at the same level. And I use the word old soul to describe it, right? I think that can be very helpful for people. I had a spiritual teacher once who said, stopping you from crossing the line, because you're right there at the line, what's stopping you is your brilliance. And I thought, what in the hell is she talking about? I didn't know what the line was. I did not know how to interpret it. I eventually came to understand that she was suggesting that I not overthink it, that I let go and trust who I am, and that I know the answer right here.
We do.
Jean, I wanted to ask you, in celebrating the lives of Matt and Jack, what do you think are some of the greatest gifts that you gave them?
That's a big question. Well, I think probably love, a loving relationship with each of them. And coming to understand who each of them was. Jack and I would have been married 60 years in May, and I've known him since we were 17.
Wow.
So we've known each other 67 years. So that's a long, long time. And Matt, of course, 52 years. And I don't know. I think coming to I wasn't this way at the beginning of my relationships with them, but coming to allow them to be who they were without my interference in who they were
Mhm,
was a gift that I gave them, I think.
mhm.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So I think those are probably, and also I didn't give them this gift. They gave me this gift of laughter. Both of them brought laughter into my life, which is very important.
It is important. I love to make Jean laugh. She has a great laugh, right? Even if it's me telling her she looks frail.
And not feeble, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Jean, one of the things you did do that, is that, and Hayley, I've known them for a long, long time, is that you created a world of order that allowed them to trust that they could go as high up on the high dive as they wanted to, and they'd be safe. Jack knew he could be a scamp, but only because you allowed it, enabled it, forgave it, encouraged it. It may frustrate you, but at times he just trusted, that one, you were going to laugh, and two, you'd forgive him.
I think
Yeah.
it's probably
And Matt had lots of challenges, but he knew Mom was, the Rock of Gibraltar. Mom was steady. And, you did give them the freedom to be who they were. And that's hard for a type A personality, especially as a mother and a wife. But you enabled them, I think, to become who they were.
Thank you. It's a lovely compliment. Really.
Well, I tell you all the time.
Good comment.
Well, we do. We need to hear things, especially when we're grieving. I
Yeah.
think, we need reinforced thoughts. You can hear from 100 friends that you haven't talked to in years, but when that flurry dies down, right? It's like the roses that were sent, start to wilt. When that goes, there's still a need for
Right.
affirmation. And sometimes we forget. We
Right.
think, all right, life's gone on. Jean got what she needed. Now I got to focus on,
Somebody else. Yeah.
weed whacking.
Oh, you're right. You're right, Brian. It's very true. Yeah. And as Ram Dass says, we're all walking the journey together.
Mhm.
And that's what this is. This is part of the journey. And this is a bump, a big bump in the road. But I know that the road's going to smooth out. I'm
And
confident.
there's definitely some beauty there.
Yes, definitely.
And Jean, the road is going to smooth out because you see it smoothing out.
Yeah.
You envision it. You put your trust in it. As we think, so we are. And as we think, so we do. If you could be in the exact same position and think, my life is over with,
Right.
I'm going to just go watch reruns.
I know. And that, that hasn't really been a big challenge for me because I have the gift of positivity, I think, of being able to see beyond the challenges, that every challenge for me, and I've always said this to my boys, every challenge in life is a lesson. And you've got to find a lesson for yourself in it and embrace the challenge and try to learn the lesson and be honest with yourself about it.
Mm.
I think for me, that's kind of been my guidance in the past, maybe since I started working with Kim, maybe the past 30 years. I think that's when I started to wake up. Really
Yeah, I think being honest with ourselves makes it easier.
Right. Yeah. We all know our weaknesses, our foibles, the things we would rather not have in our personalities, the way we would prefer not to behave. But it's then taking charge of that and changing that. Not always easy. At least for me, it isn't.
No.
I can't think of anything I'd want to change.
Of course not. Oh, yeah.
The gift of laughter. You got to
Exactly.
do it all day long, right?
Have to.
That's,
Yeah.
I think when I die, Ray will say, he made me laugh every day of our relationship. And
That's what I feel about Jack, you know, and Matt too, but Jack particularly. Oh my God.
he made everybody laugh.
And you know, being a type A personality, very controlling and pretty, you know, in charge kind of person, that laughter is what saved me from being an absolute
Yeah.
really.
Can you
Truly,
make yourself laugh now, Jean?
I can. You know, I can a little bit. Not like they could, though. Not like they could. But thinking about them and thinking about the things that they would do, and thinking about knowing how Jack would react to something that I might be feeling or saying or doing right now can make me laugh.
I think that's one of my greatest letting go sort of measures of success is how easily I laugh. And I don't need sort of that permission to be with somebody to laugh.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of that makes, I notice myself laughing and then I laugh because I'm laughing.
Uh-huh.
You know, you would.
When I forget, which I do all the time lately, a person's name or something, I have to laugh because otherwise I'd scare myself to death. If I'm unstable in the garden and I have to grab a tree before I fall, I laugh, right? Because you know, okay, there you go, Brian.
That's
I
right.
think, you know, that's a level of humility too, to be able to like kind of rather than punishing yourself, you know, going to a space of laughter and just being like, this is so serious, it's hilarious.
Yeah. And there's no need to tell Ray about it.
Yeah, no, it's just your moment.
It is. I'm gonna have to say goodbye.
Yeah, we
Because-
are actually just out of time, reaching the time limit. So thank you, Jean, so much for joining us, and thank you for sharing
It's
your story and
lovely meeting you. I hope to
bringing
speak again with you.
such
Yeah.
joy
It
and
was a great gift, Jane. Thanks a lot.
such
Thank
a
you very
gift.
much.
Thank
And
you.
Hayley,
Thank
you
you
were
both.
such a gift.
Okay, I'm gonna say goodbye.
Bye,
Lots of
Jane.
love,
Love you.
lots of sunshine, and we'll speak soon.
Okay,
Good.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.